All right, hello, we are live. Welcome, and we'll have more people trickling in. We'll go ahead and get started. Um, so welcome to this Muse Ecology webinar, Homegrown Resilience. We want to say thank you to the panelists that we have here, my wife Allison, and Gary. Say hi, Gary.
Hey guys.
Gary McDougal, and Lauren Lundike. We just heard, unfortunately, Bashira, who's doing a presentation, was going to do a presentation on growing mushrooms at home, had a last-minute emergency and was unable to join us. But she had sent her presentation, which we'll go ahead and go through. And I've had a little mycological training, so I'll go ahead and just go through her presentation. But our hearts with her. We wish she was here, and she's wonderful. So maybe some other time. But so we'll go ahead and get started. Before we get into some of the kind of nuts and bolts of some of the basics of some things that we can do, like this month and the rest of the year and ongoingly at home, we're going to first talk about, Allison's going to talk about local food systems and in general the food system, and why local food systems are resilient, and how, you know, we're all kind of feeling a lack of resiliency, a little fragility right now. So she's going to talk about that. Let me pull up this. Hi, Allison.
Hey.
All right. You want to go ahead and go?
Yeah, were you going to do a song first?
Well, okay. You want to do the song first or after the local food? All right, we're going to see a song first. We figure it's good to start off with song and welcome, start the vibe. Plus, it's kind of nice as people trickle in, come into a song. So this song came back in 2014, I believe. But if you didn't hear that, you probably think I wrote it yesterday. It's called Seed. When we lose what we have, therein lies the seed of a future where our descendants have what they need. When all that we have is each other, the walls all fade away, and we are unified in hearts and minds, starting here today. A seed in the earth and a seed in the mind will yield the fruits in a matter of time. Love is the casting motion. I am a seed. Let myself be emptied and let love cast me free. Seed in the earth and a seed in the mind will yield their fruits in a matter of time. Love is the casting motion. I am a seed. Let myself be emptied and let love cast me free.
Great. That breaks the ice for me.
Nice. Well,
yeah.
let's plant some seeds in the mind and or water them, because I think a lot of these seeds are already in our minds. But let's water some seeds in our minds and see what seeds we can get in the ground and spores. How about take it away, Allison?
Awesome. Okay, well, hi everybody, welcome, and so nice to be in this space with you. These meetings are so strange.
Real quick, this image I wanted to share. Brenna Quinlan, is that how you pronounce her name? She's a great artist, and you can check out her work. You can look it up by her name, Brenna Quinlan. And she also was the one who did a lot of the artwork for Dave Holmgren's Retro Suburbia book. So anyway, that's where this image comes from. Just wanted to go
Okay.
ahead.
Yeah, it's great to be here in this space. These spaces that we're getting more familiar with, the Zoom, these types of webinars and meetings are a little off-putting, and I'm just going to say that so that I have your names and then a few faces on the screen, and I just want to acknowledge that I hope everybody in their places, wherever you are whole and comfy, and we can just pretend that we're sharing a physical space even though we're so far apart. Because food is such a physical thing, right? I mean, we're talking about food and seeds and the food system, and that's something that we usually are together and in person to be partaking in when we're eating and sharing food with our family. At least that's the very end of the food system. I need that graphic up though.
Oh yeah.
So I was just gonna talk a little bit about food systems in general. I'm sure most of you have heard to some extent what a food system is, or the term food system, and it's essentially everything, every single input and everything that it takes to get our food to our plate from the soil it grows in and then back again. And there's been a pretty avid movement for the last 20 years or so in this country to advocate for a more localized food system and community food system. So a lot of work to begin to bring more resilience into a somewhat vulnerable food system. And right now, we have certainly seen some of those vulnerabilities poke their heads up, and with, I'll give a few examples of that, such as the meat processing plants that are across our country that have had the issues and been shut down, and there's been meat shortages. But that's only in the fragile food system. So if you see this graphic in a fragile, large is fragile, these systems have been set up for efficiencies, but there's quite a vulnerability in the efficiencies because it's efficient for a very reductionist system of getting large-scale farming to one place in a very particular way. And so one little chink on that chain is broken, and you're going to have issues that tumble down the rest of the chain. So the meat processing plant, we saw that. And why is that? Because there's only 4 slaughterhouses for the majority of the industrial system, beef and pork on this in this country, which is kind of amazing because this country eats a lot of meat. But I'll tell you what, I haven't had any shortages, and we do consciously consume meat, and we haven't had any shortages of meat because I know exactly where it comes from. Some other examples are, let's see. Oh, the vegetable waste. That's the other thing that's been all over the news, is the potatoes, farmers having to throw away milk and potatoes and all of these things. And that's because they're part of a globalized and nationalized system where they're only growing 5,000 pounds of this one type of potato because McDonald's is buying it. And when McDonald's doesn't buy it because they're shut down because they're not in well, actually, I don't know if McDonald's got shut down because I haven't left my house in a month because I had a baby. But so that type of thing, the restaurants were shut down. These large scale farms were growing large scale amounts for one chain that had to be a certain size, a particular package in a certain way. It went on a certain route to get to this certain place. And the second that closes down, it's like the Titanic. You can't just turn it around in an instant. Whereas in our localized food system, and you can see this graphic here, it's been really beautiful to witness what's happened in this last couple of months of small family farms and smaller farms that had more resiliency, even though their marketplace, which was a lot of restaurants, got shut down. They were able to pivot and immediately start doing online sales, CSAs. Our farmers markets were able to maneuver. So I've seen some really beautiful things, here in the Rogue Valley Farm to School program paired with a local farm, got a small grant from a local foundation, and we're able to put 2,000 veggie boxes into the hands of the students who were receiving free meals, but because they aren't going to school, they weren't receiving free meals. So it was just like that happened because relationships. So when we think about our food and where it comes from, there's a resiliency comes in relationships, and it comes in localized systems. And I just love Brenna for drawing this web of local resilient food system, because it takes everything from foraging to growing your own to farmers market to having local distributors at your local grocery store, asking them to provide more local food, asking the restaurant that you favor if they could support more local food, because the reality is where it's changing times, and these big systems are showing themselves to be vulnerable and unhealthy. And there's a whole slew, I could get into a whole slew of reasons why this fragile food system, this large scale industrial food system that has so many negative inputs all along the way, as well as outcomes, is something that we're moving away from. And it's been kind of a kick in the butt time to do that, because we had that little bit of a scare. And even if your grocery store still had food on the shelves, still had veggies on the shelves, there was that moment when it was like, we don't know. And so why not know? Because when you also know that you're putting your dollars into pockets of people that you love and trust and know. And if you don't know them, someone knows them, and the friends of the friends network. So when I was kind of preparing for this, I looked up the etymology of resilience, and it comes from the Latin root to spring back. And I just love that, because we've only had about 100 plus years of this monster industrial food system that's kind of consumed our lands and our way of life and our health. And so springing back to a way before, when really it was communities and neighborhoods that were growing and sharing food, and that's just a really beautiful image. So yes.
Well,
I think you had something to add.
If it's a good time for you.
Sure.
Cool. She mentioned how it's been the last century or a little more that we've really seen kind of the opposite of a local food system emerge. I wanted to presence, like that song says, a seed in the earth and in the mind yield their fruits in a matter of time. And this last 100 years, has been kind of a long time coming, maybe several thousand years, when sort of seeds in the mind have been, since they've been growing exponentially. We're really starting to notice it now globally. Which brings me to this idea of what is the most, what a local food system, the most local resilient food system is an ecology, right? And then we have this word ethno-ecology, because humans are separate, right? So it means an ecology with humans as part of it. but I like to think of old growth human cultures as well as others, and how valuable. So an indigenous human culture in place, that ethnoecology, the stories around it. It's like all the relationships, the web of relationships is enforced by the story, the knowledge, just the ecology, everything together. So I think I like to think that that's where we're headed back to, that kind of resilience. And that doesn't mean that we're not interconnected. I think we've probably only had a taste of the good things our technology can do. And it'll probably look different than a lot of people are imagining if it goes well. So anyway, just wanted to presence that. This is a big, real issue here, and it's not just a recent problem, but it's been forming for a while. And that's kind of the theme of the Muse Ecology podcast in general. We emerged as part of a beautiful ancient song, and somewhere along the way between grain taxes and alphabets, we began playing our own song increasingly out of tune with the orchestra. This is Muse Ecology, where we hear some of the voices and grooves of people in place as we make our way back to harmony. So on that note, let's get. Yeah, please, yeah.
Yeah, because that's great, because really we eat 3 times. Well, most of us eat 3 times a day. There's a lot of people on this planet right now who don't eat that many, but with every single bite, every choice that we make, we can move that much closer to this resilient food system. Bring in wild foods, which is the ethnoecology, learn what grows in intact ecosystems, start incorporating those in ways that honor the harvest, and make sure that you're tending patches if you do wild food harvesting, and then include that in with our annual vegetable agriculture that we've grown to love, because they're so sweet and tasty and big compared to the wild foods that they came from originally, and trees and all the tree fruit and nuts, and so that's what I'm so excited to hear from both Gary and Lauren about some of the how-tos, and really help us to, wherever you are on the spectrum, from I eat fast food a lot because that's just what I got to do and it's easy for me, to you're growing all your own food and you're wild harvesting and foraging. Like wherever you are on the spectrum,
ethically,
you'll get a little piece of something that'll bring you into that next. I mean, planting something. And so Gary and Lauren are going to talk about that, and Tim will introduce I'm not sure who's next, but thank you so much. And it's awesome to see your names as they come up along the side, and I look forward to having us be in person and sharing a meal next time wherever we are.
Well, that would be nice. With every one of you, let's share a meal, yes. Speaking of all these names on the side there, you have a couple things you can do too. There's the chat box, which a couple of you have found. And then there's also at the top of your screen a Q&A box. So you can start collecting your questions there. Really looking forward to the Q&A, having some discussions and seeing what kind of knowledge we can all share, and feel free to share your experiences and questions. So you can start to collect those in the Q&A box up above. And let's get over to Gary. Gary, let me end this thing. Welcome.
Hello, everybody.
Take it away, Gary.
Great.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, so yeah, I was going to speak today about growing food at your house. It's something we can all do if you have space. My name is Gary McDougall, and I run a Facebook page called Grow the Food You Love, and there I share everything that we do in growing food. Tim, do I share the files, or are you gonna start them up?
I can do it. I can start it. I'll start it, and then you can control the page turning yourself.
I'll jump right into the presentation, and then we'll go from there.
It's called Urban Agriculture with Tim, right? Yeah, that's it.
There it is.
There we go.
Yes, I thought I'd start with this. My name again, Gary McDougall, Grow the Food You Love. That's our Facebook page, and this is our front yard. So if you could imagine, and yeah, just to give you an idea, this was lawn that we had a really hard time growing grass in. It was like cement. It gets hot and dry here in the summer. We don't get a whole lot of rain, and just with our hearts and a desire for my wife and I to grow healthy food for our kids, to do something better for the planet, and just reconnect with ourselves and reconnect with my wife and I, and doing something healthy together. And but yeah, just getting reconnected with ecology and with our land, and yeah, so we started that way. And just to give you an overview of this talk, I just want to do a land acknowledgement. I am here in Victoria, British Columbia, just north of Seattle. Traditionally, there were Coast Salish people that lived in this territory, and they lived here for thousands, tens of thousands of years. And what drew me to learn from them, and I spent a lot of time in different ceremonies and going to conferences and stuff, was they lived in a way that regenerated the landscape, that they connected with the land and treated it with care in a way that food just kept coming back and coming back. And I love listening to the stories about how their fish, their salmon and clams and eating the salal and stuff was just so rich and abundant year after year, generation after generation. So I wanted to learn with them and from them how I could better take care of the land in a way that would better take care of me. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit in this talk about our degenerative system, just a little bit, and about regeneration, about how we as a species can live in a way, individually and collectively, in a way that can regenerate landscapes. That was something I got really excited about. So I will go. Here we go. So this is me in the front garden again. A couple of months ago, I was dealing a lot with our local municipality here in Victoria. And I was a little bit concerned that there wasn't a whole lot of people talking about food security. They weren't talking about our degenerative food system. And so I put it out to the community like, hey, let's meet up. Let's get out and start talking about food systems because nobody else is talking about it. So my story got picked up. It got picked up by the local news. I was expecting like a few people in my backyard and oops, I'll just go back. I was expecting a few people in our backyard, but yeah, it turned out a lot more people showed up. Go back to the beginning here. This is us in our backyard. This was me and my kids about 7 or 8 years ago. We started with the kids. It was like a sandbox area. We built a little fairy table out of. You can see right behind me there. There's a little table made out of a big Douglas fir piece of wood that somebody chopped down just a couple doors down from us. And we made a table and we were digging in the dirt with the kids. And we just turned this area into like a sandbox area. We were planting fruit trees back there, getting different vegetables we love, like tomatoes and corn, and yeah, just having fun with the kids and not having to go in the car places. We could just go outside, get our hands dirty and have some fun. But we decided we had to get it bigger because when we were growing in that back corner, there were a whole lot of mature trees and stuff, and there wasn't a whole lot of room to grow the food that we really loved. We wanted to grow everything because when we started making a list of foods that we really loved, it was like we wanted the corn and the tomatoes and the potatoes and the garlic, and the list just went on and on. So we're like, well, we have sun in the front yard. There's no shade whatsoever. So I knocked on my neighbor's door one day and just said, let's do it. It was like a quick decision. And 20 minutes later, he was digging up our front lawn, and then a truck, a local arborist company came, and they dumped 10 yards of wood chips in our front yard because we were going to add fertility to our yard. We were going to add organic matter. And so this was pretty exciting for the kids. As soon as that pile was dumped, they were out on it, and that was their play pile. And we started spreading those wood chips all around our yard. And let's see. I think I didn't get the slide. Sorry about that, guys. So this is what it looked like after. We had the big berm in the front, and that berm was like our hugelkultur bed. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. But in the hugelkultur bed, it was all our sod, all our woody debris, all the dead leaves and branches and stuff from around our yard. Old root balls are in there that we couldn't dispose of, and we planted right into that, and we get incredible harvests of garlic, and I've got squash and pumpkin and stuff growing in there now. And there's something deeply satisfying about not just planting seed. We talked about seed, but when things come to fruition, and the little guy on the left, that's my youngest son, Skylar. I remember this day, he looked outside and he said to me, he said, Dad, let's go pick that squash. And the squash was ready. The neck of it was turning brown and stuff. And so he picked it, he cut it, and he picked it up. And I noticed it was the size of his torso. So I took a picture, and on the way back in, he saw a cucumber. He's like, oh, let's get this too. And it's so satisfying for me as a parent to grow food for my children and them get excited about the harvest. They're not excited about the whole process. Like, I'm the one doing the digging and turning the compost piles and planting seeds and stuff. but they love the harvest. And the picture on the right is my daughter, Chanel. She's this was last year. I walked outside and I didn't see her at first, and I looked down and all of a sudden I caught her out of the corner of my eye, and the jar was almost filled with blueberries. She went climbed in this area that's kind of protected from the birds, and she was in there. We call her Mousy because she's so quiet, but she filled that container and brought it in the house, and I was actually able to eat a couple of blueberries, which I don't always get to eat the good stuff. The kids can get that a lot of it first, but so we did that. And this again, this was the picture in the beginning of these are my kids eating in the front yard, and they're totally posing here. We totally posed. We put a bunch of vegetables that we had picked that day in a pile, brought a chicken out, and but this just gives you an idea. This was that lawn in the front yard, and now it's, you know, producing vegetables for us year round. And my wife is a big part of this. I really needed to include her in this because she was a big part of it. She was that initial person that said, I want healthy food for my kids. And she didn't trust the system and didn't trust the grocery stores. We didn't know where our food came from, or we didn't know what they're spraying on it and stuff. So, you know, this is her in harvesting corn, and you know, we ate a lot of this corn, and we also froze a lot of it. So, you know, just in a front yard garden, you can produce so much food and store it and can it and do all this stuff. So it's something we did. This is the bed the day after we picked that corn, and I just want to give you guys an idea that you might not know about succession planting or planting right after, but the day after we harvested that corn, we cut it right off at the bottom. We don't turn our soil. We build carbon-rich soils by not turning it and leaving plants in place, but also planting right after we harvest something. So we put garlic in here the next day. And this is what the garlic looked like about 2 days ago. So many months later, we've got so many garlics coming, and we'll be harvesting those in July, a couple hundred. And already somebody showed up this morning and asked for eggs, and they asked if we could sell some garlic to them. So people are putting in their pre-orders from our garlic that we grow in our front yard. And but I wanted to do more because I love doing this stuff and I love talking about it, but I also wanted to connect with people in my community. So right before Christmas, we had this garden meetup, and this is a neighbor's house within walking distance to me. And I didn't know her that well before this, but it turns out she was very into growing food, and she also runs a non-for-profit. She's asked me to kind of join her, and we're looking for funding now so that we can grow the local growers, so that we can encourage things like growing food in your yard, converting lawns to like native habitat, and bringing back the native pollinators and insects and stuff, all the things that are threatened right now. And so lots of people came out, and we're still meeting. We're not meeting in person because of this crisis right now, but we are meeting in online, and we're trading seeds, and we're trading seed starters. And the girl right beside me to my left in this photo, she's really into canning and preserving food, so that, you know, each of us brings these different ideas and different skills and seed saving and, yeah, all these different things that we're sharing as a part of this group. And so I'm super excited about that. And sorry. And just to give you an idea, if you don't know how to grow food and stuff, this was a neighbor's backyard that asked me, hey, I want to start food. And if you can see in this picture, there's a little bit of cardboard underneath her little veggie planter that she did. In one day, they put down cardboard. On top of that, they put 6 inches of soil, and then they had a bunch of starter plants, and they planted it out. So this is easy to start. Anybody can do it. And if you don't have the knowledge, I'm on Facebook. I share this stuff, how to grow food, how to start seed, and I walk people through the growing season because I felt like in this crisis, we can share our knowledge to help the environment, to help each other, and really to come together collectively and make this world better. It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. So every Saturday morning, I'm doing free Q&As. I do consultations to people that ask me, and I go to their house and help them. I got asked about, somebody wanted to build a food forest, and so I'm going to be going over to their place soon. And yeah, we have garden courses of how to get your family built garden course started and stuff, and we have all kinds of stuff going on. So yeah, Grow the Food You Love on Facebook. That's where you can find us. And yeah, thank you so much and thank you, Tim and Allison, for inviting me to this. I love talking about this stuff, and I'll stick around and answer any questions if anybody has any. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Gary. Appreciate it. So speaking of your neighbor's food forest, Lauren's going to talk, include a little perennials in what he's talking about, and maybe get a little more nuts and bolts, and even give a couple handouts. By the way, when he does give the handouts, you can find them in the chat. All you have to do is click it and you can download it. So he's got some useful materials for us. Take it away, Lauren. Welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Tim and Allison. And thanks, Gary. That was great to see what you can do in a suburban urban context. I think that's incredibly relevant right now, since most of us are at home, right? What better use of our time? Turn off Netflix and get out there in the garden and be an active participant in our food system. And that is, it's been my day job for 20 years, is empowering people to produce their own food. Worked with residential clients. I've worked with commercial farms, anywhere from 1/8 of an acre up to several thousand acres, as a consultant and as an owner-operator of my company, Santa Barbara Organics. You can find me on the web, sborganics.com, and there'll be more references there. But point being, this has been my passion and my drive for my entire adult career. My entire career, it's been my only career. Studied botany in college, and then just had probably a distrust of authority from a young childhood. So I never trusted the system. and so now this is just really reinforcing why I never trusted the system, because it's not super reliable, not just questionable what they do with our food. So at the very least, it gives me peace of mind, like you said, Gary, that we can feed our families healthy food because we know where it comes from, we know what went into it. And that's critical right now. On top of that, we're empowering ourselves to be sovereign. It's food self-reliance. And this is, not to be conspiratorial or anything, but this is a way that power can be used to control people. Is if you don't have access to your basic needs, you're easily controlled. So if you have access to your basic needs, you're resilient and you're more sovereign. And that's the natural state of humanity, in my opinion, is to be sovereign. And we are inherently, we were for the majority of our evolution, sovereign creatures. So I don't know, I could really go down a big rabbit hole there, so I'll stop myself. But Bill Mollison said it best, we need to shift from a culture of consumption to production. If 10% of the population participated in the food system, we could basically get rid of all the industrial agriculture, a large majority of it, because it's all consumer driven. They're really just giving us what we want. We want cheap food and we want it now. And so we're all complicit in the industrial agricultural food system. And we need to be honest about that with ourselves and take corrective measures and be active in shifting that. So again, I told you I wasn't going to go there, but I kept digressing. Where should I start? I guess I'll start with some of these resources that I've uploaded here. So I'm based out of Santa Barbara, Southern California. I'm actually currently in Ojai, California. So what I have here, most of my resources are applicable to this region. It's like zone 8, zone 9, maybe down into the 7s, up to the 10s.
I just put it in the chat, by the way. I just put it in the chat. I'll go ahead and throw it in the chat. Yes, you can click that and you can download these resources. Okay.
Right, so this is just a plant list. These are all sorts of perennials, mostly perennials, that work well in this area. So we've got, fruit trees, timber trees, beneficial nitrogen fixers, bee forage, et cetera, et cetera. So go crazy on that one. Share away if you like. And then I'm just going to kind of blast through some of these.
You're in Southern California coastal area, just right in case, yeah.
Yeah, and some of those plants, it has a notes column that tells you the frost sensitivity of some of the plants. So, zone 6-ish, which could sound about 20. So it's relevant to anyone who has a subtropical to mild temperate. And Gary, I noticed you had figs growing in your yard, so we're probably pretty close actually, because you're in a coastal region as well. Figs are generally pretty tender. And this, again, another resource pretty relevant to most places actually, because these are annual crops, and a lot of annual crops can be grown in a wide range of climates. So this is an alphabetical list of annual crops, flowers, and vegetables, and their appropriate planting times, and whether you should direct seed them, which is DS, or TP, which is transplant. So you would start your seeds in flats and grow them in the ground. So kind of, that's a little more nuts and bolts there, but this is a good calendar, goes through January through December. And again, this can be applicable to many climates, not just Southern California. So Tim, you put that in the chat column also?
Yeah.
Thank you.
There, yeah.
Again, just gonna blast through all this. Fruit tree list here. This is all different types of fruit trees that grow well in a Mediterranean climate. So this kind of, it's not encyclopedic by any means, but it's a list of some common and not so common fruit trees here that I found work well in this climate. So yeah, enjoy that. Peruse over it at your pleasure. So then I think I was going to show, I'll kind of go into some of the, I didn't really have an order here in mind, but
you want to start with the nursery one, or what were the three? There was the irrigation, the nursery bit, and was there another one?
Yeah, I just loaded up this one. It was kind of, this segues from
cool.
what Gary was presenting. Is this is the house, the yard that we just moved into recently. This is about 6 weeks ago. It was mulch covered with, or wheat fabric covered with mulch. So this is the yard. And this is a demonstration, this example of what you can do when you put your mind and some resources into it, and just acknowledging, like we discussed earlier, that yeah, we acknowledge the privilege. I acknowledge the privilege of having this space, which is very small space in my opinion, in my experience, but having this available to me is, I acknowledge it's a privilege, and hopefully everybody has access to a piece of land. And if you don't have access, you can reach out to your local neighborhoods. And Gary, you mentioned earlier that there was a movement in your region where they're connecting people with land to people without land. So reach out if you don't have access to land, and you can get creative. But I did have to have some money to make some of this happen, and a nursery. So here's the bare plot. That's the side yard. This is the front yard. As you can see, oh, I really love what they did with the place. And this is mid-project. I have a plant nursery, so I had all these trees in my nursery just waiting to go. So that was kind of good timing, and I needed to move my nursery as well. So moving out I took the weed fabric out, and then just started planting. There's my wife and my wife Aubrey, and my youngest Maria. She's jumping with joy because we've now got these vegetable beds that are outlined by the flags there, and some fruit trees in the ground: peaches, plum, nectarine, apple, pomegranate, loquat, different types of cherries, etc. And then this is 6 weeks later, that same view from the first shot. So I've got summer squash, peppers, beans, cucumbers, peas. So yeah, in 6 weeks you can really turn your yard around and be producing food. So it doesn't take a lot of time. It does take a bit of effort. I won't. You need to be physically able. And here's the front yard. This is all today. So we planted it out with 25 fruit trees on about a 3,000 square foot lot. So we've kind of packed them in pretty tight. But this is what you can do with a small space. So yeah, that was that. And then I'll jump into the nursery, as you said here, Tim. So yeah, I've had
propagation and then water, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I've had an addiction to plants. I'm starting a group, a Horticulturalists Anonymous, if anybody wants to join. I really should, because I do. I just can't stop propagating plants. But there's worse problems to have. This is my youngest, again, Maria. She's the ham of the family, standing in front of some loquat trees there, which are some of my favorite to grow just because they're so hardy and kind of underrated in my opinion. They come in really early in the season. They're ripe right now, April and May. So backyard nursery basics. There we go. I'm getting a little bit of a lag going on here. This is my it's kind of beyond a backyard nursery. It's kind of mid-scale, but basically a lot of these resources were salvaged or recycled from other commercial nurseries that were going out of business. Built a shade structure with recycled shade fabric. The metal is from old horse corral. So get creative with materials around you, and you can salvage a lot. You'll be surprised what you can find when you look on the free list on Craigslist. Just temper yourself. It's easy to. I should start another Salvagers Anonymous, another Facebook group. Here's the Shade House greenhouse hybrid, which has plastic walls and an open roof because our climate doesn't really frost. It gets so hot in the summer, I just leave the roof open and have a shade cloth over the top. And then this is an old tent garage for cars. So I've used the same structure for 20 years, and I got it for free originally. So it's very little money involved in creating this. The tables cost a lot more than everything. So here's an example of the predator, or I should say pest control measures that we have to go through. We have a lot of vermin in the country, mice and rats and squirrels and birds. So this here is a propagation table. I built a little 2x, actually it's 1x material wood frame that has wire and plastic around it, and it seals very well, so no mice can get in because they will eat all your seeds. So if you want to start your seeds or your cuttings yourself, I recommend finding a space that's protected so that you don't come out in the morning and have everything gone and your heart will break. It only takes a few of those experiences before you'll build one of these. Here's cuttings, mulberry cuttings being propagated in that space. It has heat mat underneath, which increases your chances of success. And then on the top, you see a black drip hose, which is on a timer. So I have these little battery timers I'm going to show you in a little bit that just make sure you're getting enough irrigation and proper timing on that so they don't dry out. And there's results. That's a Pakistani mulberry cutting. It's 1 year old. So you can grow plants from free materials. Basically, this is from the pruning of a tree, which would normally be discarded, but we can root those of certain types of species, can be rooted and turned into plants pretty much immediately, much faster than you can by seed. So there's two ways of propagating. One is sexual propagation, that's by seed, and asexual propagation, that's by cutting or clone or grafting. So asexual propagation is much faster, and you will get the exact same variety as you started with. So I cut a piece of a Pakistani mulberry, root it, and it's going to be a Pakistani mulberry. But if you took a seed from the Pakistani mulberry and planted it, you would get a Pakistani mulberry crossed with some other type of mulberry pollen, and so it wouldn't necessarily be the exact same mulberry. That's a little basics of plant breeding and botany there, sexual and asexual propagation. That's where the open pollinated is important if you want to do sexually propagated or grow your vegetables. Open pollinated varieties will be true to type as opposed to hybrid varieties, which will go back to the wild type. So that's a big rabbit hole, and if anybody has any questions about that, you can ask me in the chat column. Here's the example of sexual propagation. These are mulberry seeds.
Don't ask in the chat column. There's a Q&A box at the top of your screen.
Right. Thank you. So, and this is example of sexual propagation. These are mulberry seeds. They grow just as well from seed. And I grow them for rootstock, which later gets grafted onto. Although you could take your chances with mulberries or male and female plants, so you might get a good mulberry. You might have your own variety even. So experiment. Seeds are relatively free or cheap. You eat a fruit, there's seeds in it, you can save some of them, and many fruit trees will come true to type, and you can grow them from seed. If they don't, you can graft on top of them once they're in the ground and get the variety that you want. So, and then there are a couple examples of the pots I use for trees, and you could use milk cartons, you could use tin cans, you can use plastic sheeting, you can use old water bottles if you don't want to purchase pots. But these, for trees, I use deep-rooted pots so that their tap roots are intact. So that's kind of a little detail there. All right, I'm just going to blast through this for the sake of time. That was the
Don't worry about it.
nursery.
Don't rush yourself too much because we're pretty good on
Sure,
time.
no problem. All right, let's see. I have a couple videos here that are pretty specific on irrigation. For those of us who live in dry climates, you will need to consider irrigation. Hand irrigation is fine with the hose. However, I find that often people don't water enough, and that's the most common problem with gardens. People say, "Why isn't my garden providing? Why isn't it growing?" And generally, I always ask, my first question is, "Well, how much do you water it?" They say, "Oh, I'll go out there for 5 minutes with my hose," and well, yeah, you probably need to put the sprinkler on for an hour every once in a while, because it does take about an hour for water to penetrate an inch into the ground. So you really do need to put out a little more water than you might think, but you don't need to do it quite so often. A lot of times people water more often than they need to, but they don't water long enough. All right, so I will do this little video here. It's a video file. I hope it works. I'm going to press play here.
Hey everybody, here's a quick little video on some irrigation systems for backyards. Just real simple timer irrigation. This here is obviously the spigot. I've got a pressure reducer here because there's a lot of pressure. It's about 60 psi. I brought it down to 30. You can get all this you can get at irrigation stores. Here I've got a 4-way splitter so that I can take this one spigot and make 4 outlets. And these are all different kinds of timers. Here's a very simple timer. I think it's Orbit brand. Real easy to program. You can see it's got how often every 2 days. You adjust here. How long? 15 minutes. Starts at 5 a.m. and there's a clock set. So this is for the veggie garden. I have every 2 days, 15 minutes. There's one for the trees. This here is just a like a manual timer. You turn the dial for however long you want it to come on. It's not on a timer. It's like an egg timer. It runs out. This one here can come on multiple times a day, which is nice for seed starts or cuttings or something that you want to keep moist every day. So those are three different types of timers you can use to make sure that your plants get water, enough water, and don't dry out. Very important.
All right, so that's simple timers example. Now I'm going to go through and show a couple of emitters. I've been doing irrigation work for about 20 years, and there's a lot of really complicated, overcomplicated systems out there, so I've tried to simplify it over time with easy to maintain emitters. So here's a quick video on different kinds of emitters for veggies and trees.
Alright, so here are some different types of irrigation emitters you can use for your garden. This here, I've got a spray head. It's on a spiked riser. This is a 90-degree spray head, and the riser just plugs right into the 1/2-inch hose there. You get a little dibble and you poke a hole in the 1/2-inch, and then there's a barb fitting on here that just plugs right in. You can also extend it with the 1/4-inch line so that you can place this little riser wherever you want. You can move it all around. But I use these overhead sprayers for veggie gardens where I'm planting in a random pattern so that it just gets full coverage. And like you could do a seedling, a lettuce seeding where you're putting lettuce seeds everywhere, and this will get pretty good coverage. I'm missing a little bit in here. I probably need to put another head in there. They're not exactly 180 or 90 degrees unless you have really high pressure. There's a 180. So it gives pretty good coverage for our little veggie garden outside of our house. I'm going to take you around and show you some of the emitters I use for trees here. This is a nectarine tree, and I've got these fan jet here, and it's got what's called a little top hat on it. So here I was telling you about the riser and how you can extend it. You can put a little 1/4-inch hose into the 1/2-inch line there with a little adapter. And then this head here is nice because you can take this little thing called the top hat off, and that makes the water spray out about 10 feet radius. Whoa, really far. So if you have a bigger tree, once the tree gets bigger, these trees were just recently planted, so once the tree gets bigger, you take this off and it spreads the water out far enough for the root zones. But when it's young, you want the water to be focused around the root ball. So this little top hat thing is cool. It just directs the water right to the base of the tree. In general, you don't want the trunk to get wet. But these things are really, I like these for trees, especially fruit trees that have surface feeder roots, because these you can tell if they're working or not. You can see them, excuse me, see them real easy, and you can clean them out if you just get a really fine wire. This head here unscrews, and you can poke the hole, the orifice. Sometimes it gets a little piece of dirt in it or something, and so you can clean it out real easy. That's the spiked riser with the fan jet on them. I've got them for these, another peach tree. Now over here I've got these flag emitters. These are 1 gallon per hour emitters on the loquat trees here. They require a little less water. They were smaller plants, so these emitters put out 1 gallon per hour just in a slow drip. You can see it coming out. So that's handy for fruit trees, whatnot, that don't need a bunch of water. This one looks clogged. And it's cool, you can actually turn it. See if I can do this.
I'm turning the top of the head,
I
not
turned
the
it,
motor itself.
and it actually increased the flow a little bit because it was must have been clogged or something. So those are cool. They're not adjustable, but you can clean them out. You can take the top off. So again, that's the 1/2 inch line. That's the supply, and it's going down. And you can see I've got some other of the risers over here with the fan jets for a little pomegranate tree here. So that's pretty basic for your trees. That's after 20 years, this is what I've come up with as the simplest, the most effective irrigation for your fruit trees.
All right, here we go. Hope it's definitely getting into some details here, but I hope it's useful and helpful for people. So I think I'm just going to go into the parts. Maybe I won't show that one. I'm going to show the inline.
Show the parts. The parts one was great.
Parts one versus the inline. Okay. All right. And then
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to choose, but yeah.
Okay. Show the parts one. So this is just a little more detail on the actual.
Right, here's a little more detail on the different types of emitters that you can use. Here's that spike.
Sorry, I paused it because that first one is one I didn't explain. That's a spectrum shrubler. I didn't explain it. That's adjustable. That's another kind of emitter you can use.
Riser I use a lot. You can plug it straight into the 1/2 inch with this barb fitting, or you can connect it to a 1/4 inch hose with a little 1/4 inch connector and extend it out and run it wherever you want. Use this little dibble to poke a hole in the 1/2 inch so that you can put the barb fitting in, and use this for all poking holes in it to attach any 1/4 inch fitting. It's got a little piece of wire tied on it to clean out the heads. Here's a 180-degree spray head. Different colors put out different flow rates. Here's the fan jet I like to use for trees. This is a 270-degree pattern. Here's the top hat that goes on top of that to direct the water right to the base of the tree. Both these heads screw straight into the top of this riser, and you can use this little tool to screw in the heads and take the heads out so you can clean them because they get clogged. Here's the 1 gallon per hour emitter called a flag emitter. Those are low flow. Those are nice. You plug it straight into the 1/2 inch line, and then you can extend it out by putting the 1/4 inch on the end there, and you can you cut the 1/4 inch off and you direct it to wherever you want. So that's handy. And then you got some fittings here. This is a female swivel tee, but I wanted to show you a compression tee that has this compression fitting on all 3 sides, but I ran out. Just used them all. But this is to put a split in your line. So you have your main line running along and you want to put a branch off. You put a T in there, And this, the 1/2 inch squeezes inside of here as a compression, so it's kind of got to weasel it in there, but it holds good. It's kind of hard to do, but it holds good. And this is a 90 degree, because the hose can tend to kink when you go around a corner, or sometimes you need the 90 so it doesn't kink. Here's a coupling in case you make a mistake or there's a hole in the line, you can patch it with that. Here's the figure 8 fitting, which goes on the very end of the line to seal it so that it creates the pressure you need. And this is a male adapter, or I'm sorry, female adapter, that goes onto the hose head spigot itself, so threaded. And make sure you know the difference. There's hose and pipe thread. These are all hose thread versus pipe thread, which you use for PVC or galvanized, etc. So, oh yeah, goof plugs in case you poke a hole where you don't want it, or somehow a hole gets in your 1/2 inch line. These are great. They've got 2 different size little dibbles. You can fill the poke into the line and patch a leak. So that's pretty basic irrigation setup there for your perennials.
All right. Well, yeah, for the sake of time, I think that's probably enough. I don't want to take much more time. I kind of dove into the weeds there, but hopefully that's useful for people, because irrigation, again, it's easy to plant your garden and have it looking all great, and then come back after a hot day and see it all withered and dead, and that's crushing. Oh, you want to do this one?
Okay, so here's
Ah,
irrigation systems for the veggie gardens. This is my peas here, up on the trellis. This is drip tape. It has an emitter every foot. They have different spacing emitters, 8 inch, 6 inch. This one has spacing every foot of 1 gallon per hour emitter. So when the water comes on, a little drip of water comes out, a little slit every foot in it. Basically, if you leave it on long enough, it wets the entire soil surface. So it's pretty good for low water use, low pressure. It's pretty fragile. You can split. Too much pressure, it'll break. So it's kind of something more for the professional, but it's suitable for veggie gardens. So then again, I have the 1/2 inch supply with a little adapter, and the drip tape comes off here and runs along the length of the bed. But there's another product which is actually more durable. It's the 1/2 inch version, which has, I got it here on my strawberries. Let's see if I can get some good light. And this has, same thing, has emitters every foot. Here's an emitter here. It's kind of hard to see, but there's a little hole in the line where water comes out at 1 gallon per hour every foot. So it's really simple to lay out because it has that hole every foot. You can just lay it out and then plant your veggies right along where the water comes out. And that's really handy because this stuff is super durable, lasts a long time. You can switch it around for all types of different crops. But highly recommended inline emitter 1/2 inch line, and that's good for your veggie gardens.
Yeah, so it's like the best use of petrochemicals, the best use of oil, in my opinion, is irrigation technology and diesel to dig earthworks for harvesting rainwater. Those are the two uses of oil that are the best right now. So irrigation technology is pretty amazing, and obviously there's a lot more to it, but hopefully that gives you enough information to get started with the basics, so that the crops you do plant don't die. And I think that's pretty much all I had for what I wanted to share. But I appreciate it very much. Thank you, everybody. If you have any questions, I'll stick around and I'll answer anything.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lauren. That's great. Yeah, and any questions you guys have, feel free to put it up in the Q&A box up at the top of your screen. And then if you want to ask your question on screen, we can do that too. So for those of you who came a little late in the beginning, we mentioned that Bashira, we were really looking, she's wonderful, and we were really looking forward to her talking about growing fungi. she had a last minute emergency. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to make it. And our hearts are with her, and we wish she was here, but she had sent her presentation. So we're going to go ahead and look at it, and I'm going to go ahead and run through it. Like 5 years ago, I did take a mycology course, but I haven't practiced as much. So I'm not as experienced as her, but we're still going to be able to learn this stuff. And she made a really good presentation so you can see pictures and we can talk about this stuff. And I learned, by the way, from Jay Schindler, Fungi for the People, and he's amazing. All right. So growing mushrooms at home. We went from plants to mushrooms, which is kind of the opposite of the way things happened on land, right? They say that the plants moved onto land from the sea. The commonly accepted story is that happened with the aid of a particular type of fungi called mycorrhizal fungi. So most plants these days have symbiotic relations with mycorrhizal fungi to help them get the nutrients and compounds they need. In this presentation, we're talking about decompositional fungi, with fruiting bodies. So when Jay Schindler was teaching me about cultivation, the class, I liked how he said about first the life cycle of a mushroom. So let's take one that grows on a leaf litter patch. The leaves fall, everything else is kind of dormant, but underneath the leaves, everything's moving. They're myceliating. They're starting to fill that substrate. Mycelium is the web, this little like tendrils like a web. That's the main body of the fungi. It can go for miles in some cases with one organism. And the mushrooms we see is the body that fruits up out of that web. So it goes through. There's these phases where it'll inoculate, a spore will land, it will germinate, it'll grow out. If it meets other things, they'll get together and actually share DNA, which is cool. But then it'll fill up whatever the area is. So then by the time then maybe it's in the fall, it's filled up its substrate, whether it's leaves or it's a log that it's filled up. And if it's fully myceliated, the substrate, and then the moisture conditions are right, it fruits. So just keeping in mind kind of what these types of fungi do. And Bashira has a presentation here about some really easy, simple ways to sort of mimic that process or parts of it at home to grow mushrooms. So growing mushrooms at home without much investment in supplies and equipment. And this is all put together by Bashira Mohammed with Zoom Out Mycology, the founder of Zoom Out Mycology. She's been studying mycology for 5 years. I really wish she was here. Our hearts are with you, Bashira. Environmental science and policy student at SOU and founder at sustainability company and mushroom farm Zoom Out Mycology since 2017. And they're just over the mountains from us. So she's, Allison knows her from her food system work. Driving sustainability with fungi, she writes. Couple little things. Mushrooms are a member of the fungi kingdom, have cell walls made of chitin, chitin, I had to look that up. It's a long chain polymer, derivative of glucose. It's the same stuff that's in like the exoskeletons of arthropods and crustaceans and stuff. So it's different than, I guess, the cellulose of plants. I think that's, and they have a heterotrophic lifestyle. So kind of look that up too. Requiring complex organic compounds of nitrogen and carbon, such as that obtained from plant or animal matter for metabolic synthesis. So what she's saying there is that they're like us. They need to eat other carbon-based life material, as opposed to plants who can generate it from the stuff in the air and the sunshine energy, which are like autotrophs, I guess. So they're like us. They need to eat and to do their thing. Mushrooms can be a great ally to build resilience in a food and ecosystem. All right, and overview. 3 techniques for easy to grow mushrooms, including shiitake, oyster, and lion's mane. She's going to talk, or the presentations, we'll talk about the fruiting block method, log cultivation, and then a garden bed, like a straw bed. And her Zoom Out Mycology, I want to say too, in the end, you'll have the the website, Zoom Out Mycology. Not only do they make really good medicinal teas, I actually was just drinking this wonderful lion's mane ginger berry tea, really good for my brain. But they also do sell spawn. So if you decide you want to do the stuff that we're talking about, you can order spawn bags or fruiting block from their website. So let's see here. Technique 1, fruiting block. So basically, you get your fruiting block, which you can order it from various places, but I recommend supporting Bashira. They're great. Yeah, Zoom Out Mycology. That info will be at the end. But basically, real simple. That'll come. You cut a slit in the bag, cover it with a large plastic bag, she says, or something to keep the humidity in there, and keep it, like, spray it, keep it moist for 10 to 21 days, and that'll, you know, recreate that moisture condition that it's used to, and it's fully myceliated. So once again, it's like as if any substrate in nature was full, and then the moisture is right, and it fruits like after the rains. So this is what we're mimicking here. And then she went ahead and put a little slide into how a fruiting block is made, because this is some basic stuff to get going at home, but if you really want to dive into it, which is awesome, it can be addictive, and it's really, mycology is a whole different thing. Mushroom heads are awesome. I love mycologists. I want to become one. I really want to be one. But basically, so agar inoculations using sterile technique, and then that's prepare. Agar is a it's a substrate, like a sugar-based. I forget the ingredients. Then you prepare the grain, sterilize and inoculate it, and prepare her sawdust. That's what she uses for these species. Different mushrooms eat different things, but the ones that she grows, use the type of sawdust that they use. Inoculation, the art, science, and act of introducing of microorganisms into surroundings suited to their growth. That's just a little overview about how this block comes to be if you order it and start from that. But mycology can get real deep. I'm finally ordered the things to make. I got them in the mail. I'm going to make my own flow hood finally and apply some of the stuff that I learned from Jay Schindler. And Jay's amazing, you guys. Fungi for the people. So those are the two: Zoom Out Mycology and Fungi for the People. Great folks. So technique number 2, log cultivation. So she says, prepare the logs, use a wire brush to remove moss, not damaging the bark. The bark's going to keep in the moisture, and it's also going to keep it from getting invaded by competing organisms. Drill the logs. There is a link that she has here. I'm going to put this link in the chat box that she has at the end of her thing. So you can see these things, and if you want to get these tools, these resources, then you can order them. Okay. Normally I would have done this while she was talking, but okay, cool. So that link's in the chat. So basically, and I've done this before too. It's really great. It's a lot of fun. You get your log, and you drill your holes in a pattern. There's different ways. A lot of people do it in like a diamond shape, where here's part of your log, and you kind of like here, you know. So you go in a circle, and you stagger it, go in a circle. Jay Schindler also said that one technique he likes to mess with is planting it drilling the holes tighter together and then further apart the rings, because the fungi will actually grow faster along the grain of the wood than across it. So because it has to cross that threshold every time. So so you drill your holes, and then that's a palm tool she has there. It's where you take your substrate that you can order. It's the same fruiting bag, and you can take that sawdust spawn and you put the thing in it, and you pull it out, and then you can just punch it in. So it's real fun and quick. You get your holes ready, and you just like boom, 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 and that thing will punch just the right amount into that hole, and then inoculate, insert spawn using palm tool, and then cover the filled holes with beeswax, or with a wax. The idea of that is to keep it safe, keep it same like the bark, keep it from getting competing organisms in there, and the moisture and everything. So that'll keep it nice, because you've broken the seal with that drilling. So you reseal it. So we're mimicking what the natural processes basically, but with more success. That's what so with these lab techniques and these other techniques, we can get more of the food we want to eat per substrate than we would maybe in nature, because it has to compete with all these other things. So that's kind of the purpose of Jay Schindler at least taught about what the lab is doing there. It's reducing competition for what we want to eat or a medicine. Technique number 3, straw and wood chip beds. So use your fruiting block to inoculate a garden bed. Time frame: 1 season to establish, spring; 1 season to consume the substrate, like we talked about, summer; and 1 season to fruit in the fall. And she talks about the process here. So a weed whacker, you can see on the right there, they take a bunch of straw, and she says, be careful, please. They use a weed whacker to chop up the straw real good, just in a trash barrel there. And straw, not hay. And then a container. So benefits: faster and even more colonization by the fungi when it's chopped up like that. It doesn't have to grow across less air that doesn't have food in it, so it can just move through the substrate more efficiently. This gets back to the food systems. What we mean by, people keep saying that the big food system is efficient, right? And it depends what we mean by efficiency and what we're taking into account. But anyway, next steps: pasteurization, selectively killing off competitor organisms. So there's that thing. What we're doing is reducing competition for what we want to eat. So one method that she talks about is a cold water soak for 12 to 48 hours, or hydrated lime soak 12 to 24 hours, which the cold water soak, as she explained it to me when we were talking about it, it creates anaerobic conditions. So then all the aerobic microbiology that would compete to colonize that substrate, they die. And then you have all the anaerobes, and then you drain it and expose it to the air, and then all the anaerobes die, and then you have a nice, freshly, relatively not sterile, but not as much competition substrate. And the lime does the same sort of thing, but by affecting the pH, such that the competition doesn't live. Next steps: so you take and you lay down cardboard, you lay down straw, like a layer of that chopped straw that's been gone through that process. You can also do it with you can build a steam thing. There's different ways to pasteurize or sterilize your substrate. That's something you can Google or DuckDuckGo or Ecosia or something. So lay down the straw, lay down cardboard, lay down the straw. This is in like a nice part of your yard that gets kind of shade, a little more shade, Then you lay down your mycelium, some of that spawn bag. Lay down straw on top of that. Put some more of the spawn on top of that, etc. So you make a lasagna. That's what Jay Schindler called it, basically. It's like inoculation lasagna. And as he writes, more spawn, faster colonization. So, but yeah. So I wish he was here to answer questions. Feel free to ask fungal questions. And I'm not an expert, but I might be able to point in the right direction. And again, this is her, Bashira. We wish you were here. She put her contact, so I am going to go ahead and put those in the chat also, so that you can just click them. There they are. Okay. All right. Thank you, Bashira. And admin at Zoom Out based in Central Point. Once again, you can shop on their zoomoutmycology.net. They sell the spawn that was shown, so you can do these techniques if you want. You can buy their spawn until you want to make your own lab, like I'm hoping to do. And they sell wonderful teas, medicinal teas from the mushrooms that they grow, from the fruits of the mushrooms they grow. So thank you Bashira, and we wish you were here. On that note, let's go to some questions. Our first one, we got Benjamin here. Benjamin, it's good to be doing webinars again. It's Benjamin's one who, both with the podcast and then also with the webinars I've done, he's been there a lot. So I know he wants to come up on screen. That's what I'm saying. So I'm going to bring Benjamin up so he can ask his question in person, so to speak. All right, promote to presenter. Welcome, Benjamin. Try that again. This is a new app. I stopped using Zoom. Oh, he's on. Okay. Can we hear you, Ben? Can you turn on your camera? Okay. Oh, he was doing some audio MIDI stuff with his computer, and he messed up his audio, he said in the chat. So I'll read your question, Benjamin, and let's just do a weird thing. We can see your face, and then you can talk in the chat, and it'll rhyme with this whole weird time. Anyway, so whatever. Okay, let me read your question. As long as we don't get used to it. Okay, 2 of our 5 neighbors, both upstream of us in the drainage, subscribe to a company that comes monthly to spray chemicals on their lawns. I've yet to pursue lawyer labor bringing a lawsuit on the company. Do you think it's worth pursuing that now that the COVID situation has brought food security into a more immediate crisis, and therefore can be argued that they're infringing on our right to safely feed ourselves, Victory Garden style? I'm assuming that he's tried other methods and they weren't. I wish we could talk about it, but oh, okay. He just chatted about that. So that's his question. Then he chats. Let's go back to the chat. I've so far just worked gradually to gain a good neighbor relationship with them. How's that going, Benjamin? While he's typing that, or anything else he wants to say, does that bring up anything for you guys? It's kind of a broad question.
It is a bit of a broad question. It brings up a lot for me. The first thing that came to mind was I've never been a big fan of lawsuits. What's happened here in my municipalities, they've banned chemicals. So homeowners aren't allowed to use chemicals on their lawn. So that's an option. That's happened in numerous different municipalities around that just people have gotten together and just outright banned the use of that stuff. Having said that, close by in a neighboring municipality, there's large agricultural areas where farmers are still spraying it, and I know that there's a municipal councillor in that municipality that's fighting that, and it's a tough one, right? So one of the things I'm doing as well is we're going to be getting together with a bunch of neighbors and stuff and talking about like alternatives to lawn and planting native plants and planting and feeding lawns naturally with things like compost and with our wastes and just changing our relationship with the land. So yeah, there's so much education that needs to be done. I don't know anything about lawsuits though.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Lauren.
Yeah, Lauren.
Oh yeah, I was just going to agree that I think lawsuits the last option on the table, and it sounds like Benjamin, you're doing the first option, which is to befriend them, and then the next option would be to offer alternatives, which you also mentioned, Gary, which is first and foremost to take care of what's the problem they're addressing with the chemicals. Maybe there's a way that there's an organic solution to that, and that might be a business opportunity for a savvy person to offer an organic lawn care, although it might be pulling teeth for somebody. I don't like lawns. And then the next option is to, like you said, Gary, agreed, pull the lawn out, plant something else. So, and then policy, that's the long game, is to get the local boards and city councils on board with it. But yeah, it's a private property issue, and it's incredibly complicated and been going on for a really long time. But there are advances being made because it is potentially polluting the commons, and water, and the soil, which is a common resource. So yeah, I think patience is the most important thing you need in these kinds of issues.
Yeah. And I'm wondering if it's a runoff concern, or is it like the spray getting on you, or is it like a runoff? It's the thing that comes from runoff kind of follows from that. If you do it like a wood chip bed, kind of like we talked about with the straw, I've seen people do like a myceliated mulch basin in between areas. So if you're getting runoff from your neighbor's property, you can actually do a myceliated mulch basin to myco-remediate that toxin as it comes into your property. So that's that sort of thing. A phytoremediation, myco-remediation, using life to remediate a toxin that can be done on the border. You can make. There's different techniques. There's I don't. You probably know some other ones too, Lauren, with like with plants and stuff, right? For that sort of thing. I'll
Yeah.
plug. I'm gonna plug Lila Darwish's book, Earth Repair, on bioremediation. She's amazing, and she actually spent time with Jay Schindler while she was writing the myco remediation chapter, and that's called Earth Repair by Lila Darwish. Fantastic book, and she gets into some of this stuff. It's actually this kind of situation, and I've known people who have used. Down on the Kadauk Reservation in Klamath. I know someone who was working down there a few years ago. I actually met him at one of Jay's courses before I'd ever met folks down there, and they were doing it with road runoff, going to the creek and making a mulch basin to myco remediate that. So that's another option. Anything come up for you, Lauren? Anything else?
No, I think mushrooms are the magical myco-remediators of everything toxic, and they metabolize many types of chemicals. They don't just remediate them; they completely change the chemical structure. But yeah, I think it sounds like Benjamin put another message in here. Said he's been taking his time. It sounds like it's a bindweed is the issue in the lawn, and that's a really challenging one because it's a stoloniferous. It has underground rhizomes. Glyphosate will not kill bindweed in my experience. Well, I don't have experience spraying glyphosate on bindweed, but my guess is it's not going to help. So it's a bigger issue of changing. It's the civic responsibility and the civic culture that we have around this competition and domination of nature. It's a really, really big rabbit hole where we have to slowly shift our relationship with nature from one of dominance to one of participation, and that's the long game here. And so when you're approaching them, it's you look at when we are in the landscape, not just where we are but when we are. And bindweed is a medium succession plant. It's kind of a colonizer. Its duty is to establish, hold soil together. And so you look at the ecological niche that bindweed is fulfilling, and maybe there's some other plant that could outcompete it, or we could work with it in some way where it will slowly be selectively pushed out of that niche. Like you said, you planted a tree right there, so maybe the tree will shade out the bindweed, and over long term we'll get rid of it. So it's a lot of these solutions take a lot longer than most people have the patience for. That's why the chemical culture is so addicting, because we want instant results, and unfortunately nature does not work in that way. Often it takes generations for the results to be seen. And yeah, I take issue with like removing these riparian weeds that establish in riparian corridors. But what are they doing? They're holding the bank, but people will come in and spray glyphosate in there because they don't want to have arundo weed because they think it is outcompeting the natives. But over time, in 100 or 200 or 300 years, the native plants will return. It's just we have our myopic vision of what is correct at this point in time. So it's
on that note too, like I have a friend, Jacob Shockey, and I've done work for him, like riparian restoration and stuff here locally, and including some non-toxic blackberry replacement that takes years, right? You chop, mulch it, leave it, build the soil, you plant in it. But that's we're getting more into process-based than event-based restoration. And one of the things that reminded me of is he recently told me on his property, there was these few places where there was just in like a meadow area, there's a bunch of blackberry in a ditch that was just all overgrown. And he didn't touch it. And now he's got like these 5-year oak volunteers and stuff that are coming up through it. So it's like it's kind of created this nursing environment. And you don't have them all around that. So it's interesting. If you got the long view, then these things are filling a niche for a reason because of the way things work. One other thing I like that we moved into the neighbor's problem and how to address it. That's like the first thing that comes for me is like, if it's a neighbor with a problem like that, and it's not just a big industrial farm that's like turning the Titanic or something, then it's like, let's talk about morning glory, So I like that approach, of, hey, if he doesn't want to do it, volunteer to do it for him, so you don't have, toxins on your property. If you research it, figure it out, and do it for him, if he doesn't want to do it. And I'm curious what fire and morning glory's relationship or lack of one is. Maybe it needs to be burned. I don't know. But yeah, that's where I would go with that. But let's go on to Rissa. And Lauren writes, bindweed is actually native to many areas. And on what you said, I knew a practitioner, it might have been bindweed, it might have been a different one, but in this whole area, there was people that were all having problems with these weeds, and they were all kind of organic minded. They didn't want to spray, but it was like it just kept coming back. He researched a species that was very closely related to it, but that was it was a native, and he planted that and it outcompeted. So it was like, because they were close, they were kind of filling a similar niche. So it doesn't, even if it's not native, is there another plant that's less invasive or that's useful or whatever that that might be closely related to it as far as having a similar evolutionary niche that might outcompete it? Because the war, like Lauren said, this gets back to the mind and the seed in the mind. It's very old. This war mentality, war on nature. The Babylonian creation myth has Marduk the Mighty slaying Tiamat, the wild mother that everything came from, slaying her and creating a new world out of her body. We're still living that seed in the mind. That myth is the modern myth. So I think the big thing about right now is really, it's not even a cliche. We can decide to not finish the Babylonian mythology. We can decide to get off the train. And that starts with each, right? So I want to go on to Rissa Ray's question. Rissa, if you can say in the chat, do you want to come up or do you want us to just answer it? I'd love to see your face if you want to come up. What do you think? We'll just read the question. If she wants to come up. Okay, so her question is to Lauren. And if anybody else has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. Let's get to your questions. We all want to learn together, and we're all learning here. To Lauren, you said you need to be able-bodied to grow your garden, but I know a local regenerative agriculturalist who was injured when she needed to start her beds, so she tapped into the local time bank for assistance. Do you know of any support systems such as time banks in your area? Have you ever been injured and needed to rely on others? So that's a great point about, the physical privilege, and ways to and workarounds for lack of it, right? What do you think, Lauren?
Well, I think that's a great solution. Absolutely. Creative problem solving is important all the time, always, especially in this time. So yeah, you need to be, I suppose what I should have said is you need to be creative in addition to, or instead of, if you're not physically able or if you don't have capital or money available to you, it just means that you have to be more creative. In my area, I'm not aware of time banks, but I feel like there's one in
there is one.
Ojai area.
Santa Barbara time.
Santa Barbara has a time bank.
I bet there's overlap.
Oh yeah, Santa Barbara. I don't know. Talk to Johnny about it.
Yeah. So yeah, those resources exist, and I think now might be a time for this kind of the Amish barn raising model, where everybody, you know, the Amish will all come together and build the neighbor's barn, and then they'll move on to the next neighbor and the next neighbor, and it's a community driven project based action. So I think now's the time for, we all need to organize those movements in our local areas. And Gary, it sounded like Victoria had something. You mentioned the Grow Together movement, which I think is really powerful, because we do need to, in my opinion, we need to shift beyond the centralized models of governance and move more towards a regional and local governance, in addition to the local food systems, because the centralized power structure obviously impacts us in a lot of ways negatively, and it's centralized, or I should say decentralized and regional governance by consent is ideal, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's the long game again. Long game again. But I think
was gonna say, also the intelligence of everyone, right? Because we all have a genius inside of us that's latent, you know. And so it's like the most intelligent world I can imagine is an interconnected world of local autonomy, where everyone's creativity is empowered, right? So I mean, that's an intelligent world. That's the intelligent way out of the Anthropocene into a harmonious world where we can stick around, you know, and so can others, you know. So
that would be the mycelial strategy for sure. And if we want to mimic the most, arguably the most intelligent beings in the universe, and mushroom, the fungi kingdom, we would model our governance systems off of their networks, and what the internet is. So I think there's some wisdom there in the biomimicry. So yeah, I completely agree. And I think now's the time for us to come up with all these creative solutions. And none of us individually have all the answers, but together we do, like you said, Tim, and that is the most resilient system is one that's based on diversity and decentralized power structures. So yeah, I think we got into the weeds there, but I hope it sounds like a comment more than.
Oh yeah, no. And back to the mycorrhizal fungi that we started with, the ones that mycorrhizal that live only in symbiosis with roots. They connect plants. They talk about a local food system. You know, all these plants of a wide area, even across species, are sharing nutrients and things, you know, through this mycelial network. So we're talking about in between kingdoms working together, so that, like, sharing, trading. Sure, there's some competition, but in general, it's a really a collaborative thing, evolution, you know. And so it's really what we want to get back to, is that basic archetype of what nature is, you know, which is a web of relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so even the word governance, like, I think when we get it right, a lot of words like nature, governance, they might not mean so much anymore. You know, it's like it'll be a world that works, and it's interconnected and works, but it's like it works in each place, and each creature has its place, and its intelligence is honored, and each human is honored for their intelligence, and the beaver is honored for its intelligence, and the mycorrhizal fungi, and the soil biology, and the trees, and the old trees that mother everything. You know, everything has its intelligence that co-evolves with everything else. I don't know about for a reason, but because of the way reality is. You know. So anyway, I guess that wraps it up. Anything else anybody wants to say about anything? Or let me check if we got any more questions, because I think that was about it. Everybody's question shy today. I guess you covered stuff in their heads. Anything else you want to share, Allison? A little closing word?
No, I don't have anything in particular. It's been really great to be here today and to listen and learn. And I am, I want to go plant stuff. I want to go put more stuff in the ground. Perennials. I want to change our diet to perennials, and I also want to eat.
Not only
and
perennials,
I gotta
right?
feed her too.
You mean more perennials?
More perennials,
Oh.
more perennial-based diet. Yeah, stuff that doesn't take so much time and effort, that can grow with us over the years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Been awesome. And nice to see all of you virtually.
Yes.
You too. I was thinking about you guys this morning about how this is just my final thoughts is just how we plant a seed and then something grows and you guys have a little baby and we all have, we're all parents here and there's this greater reason why we do all this and for that better world for those kids, but just how amazing just giving birth to a child and the mother holding the baby and then nursing and the food, and it's also sacred, and we can do that with our children, we can do it with the earth, and it's just like sometimes I wonder, like, how don't, like, every human being, why don't they get this? We give birth to kids, it's sacred. Why can't we have that relationship with the planet? And I think people have just lost it, they've forgotten. So
Yeah.
I was gonna say, talk about a local food system,
yes, absolutely, yes, and that is so amazing, so amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, anything else anybody wants to share? I think on that note, micro local food system. All right. Much love, everyone. Thank you, and thank you for sharing. Thank you, Allison.
Mhm.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Bashira, for making that presentation, and wish you could have been here to talk with us. But thank you so much. And
Thanks for
again,
joining
you can find the link to her website in the chat, and all the resources that Lauren showed are downloadable. So thanks, folks, and have a beautiful day.
Thank
See you
you.
soon.
Yeah.
Happy growing.
All right, let's go plant something.
Yes.